Ruslan.
Something came out over the news past couple of days. Joe Budden from the Joe Budden podcast, one of the biggest podcasts they were just exclusively with Spotify. Before that, he was at Complex for I think one of the dopest pieces of content that Complex made. And now he's on Patreon. Now, why am I talking about this? Because I think this potentially game-changing for a lot of creatives, and specifically a lot of Christian creatives. Even though Joe Budden is not a Christian creator himself, this impacts a lot of this. And I'm gonna explain why, and I'm gonna explain for you guys, if you're an aspiring Christian creative or an aspiring creative in general, why this is important, okay? So before I get into that, I'm gonna be reacting to Jack Conte over at Patreon. If you guys don't know who Joe Budden is, Joe Budden podcast, former rapper, has been in the major corporate structure for a long time. And he just came over to Spotify. So I'm gonna play you guys this video, I'm gonna react to it, and I'm gonna explain why this is important and can impact a lot of us. Okay, so check this out. So again, this is from Jack's vlog, and then the full podcast is on Joe Budden's episode, and he kind of goes over some of the particular.
Effective immediately, the Joe Budden podcast will be bringing 2 additional bonus episodes to Patreon.
Joe Budden just announced he's bringing his podcast to Patreon. He's doing live show pre-sales, bonus episodes of the podcast just for his members, a members-only community, and a bunch of other cool stuff for his fans. Here's what happened. Joe had a deal with Spotify to distribute his podcast, but in September of last...
By the way, Jack's freaking vlogs are incredible. Like, if you ever watch one of Jack's vlogs, Jack is, I think, the founder of Patreon, one of the executives of Patreon, right? So his vlogs are phenomenal, all right? But anyway, let me get back to this.
Year, he announced that he was leaving that deal and leaving Spotify.
September 23rd, this podcast, new episodes of this podcast will no longer be available on Spotify exclusively.
And essentially what happened was he and Spotify couldn't come to an agreement about...
So I covered this on the channel. Joe Budden comes from a corporate structure, and he had an exclusive deal with Spotify for the podcast. It didn't work out because they said Spotify wasn't taking care of him properly through the whole podcast. I covered some of that. Joe Budden is an out-of-the-box creative. Joe Budden is not politically correct. Joe Budden is not a part of the establishment. If anything, he's anti-establishment in a lot of ways, and he kept trying to put himself in the establishment bubble. He kept trying to do these deals with Complex and with Spotify, and it just didn't work out. Just wouldn't work out. Now he's directly with Patreon. Do you guys see the parallel? If you're a believer in Jesus, do you see the parallel? Do you see the parallel if you're a out-of-the-box artist, if you hold some views that are contrarian, if you hold some things that are not a part of the mainstream, you don't really necessarily have a place to thrive if you don't fit the mold, if you don't cover certain topics in certain ways. I don't fit the mold. And when I got into this space, guess what? When I started doing YouTube in 2015-ish, there was no light at the end of the tunnel. It's either make it big or you're gonna be broke, right? Or this is supplemental. This is something you do on the side. When Patreon stepped on the scene, it leveled the playing field for a lot of us that maybe you don't have 10 million subscribers or 5 million subscribers or 1 million subscribers. However, I'm able to make a living because of things like Patreon, and I don't fit, and the algorithms aren't always going to play to my liking, and I'm also not the type of creator that may get a big bag from Spotify, and neither is Joe Budden. So how does this apply to you guys? How does it apply to you guys? Well, if you're an aspiring creator, there's now a path to monetization that doesn't require you having millions of subscribers or selling, tens of thousands of merch orders. There's now an alternative path because people are going to be more and more and more familiar with this Patreon thing. So this is a good thing for Christian artists, Christian producers, Christian vloggers, Christian podcasters, Christian pastors, okay? Understand this because it allows for a space for folks who don't have politically correct views to thrive. I'm gonna play some more of this video.
The guard is changing, and creators have the leverage. And if y'all not gonna treat us accordingly, then we're gonna go and make our own decisions and do our own thing.
The guard is changing, and y'all going to treat us accordingly. The value of content, the value of whether it's a podcast, whether it's a video, a Bible study, a rap song, whatever, that is what's in question. And the value of things is determined by what people are willing to pay for it. You guys feel me? The value of something is determined by what you're willing to pay for. This is why humans are immensely valuable, specifically when you're looking at it from a Judeo-Christian worldview. If you are not a Christian, that's fine. But if you are a Christian, you understand that your life is extremely valuable, not just because it's valuable. Yes, you're valuable as a human, but why are you valuable? Because morality and the good news of Jesus says that, hey, your life is so valuable that Jesus was willing to lay down his life, die for you. That is how valuable you are. Someone was willing to give everything up, right, for you. The value of something is determined by what people are willing to pay for it. That is why there's value in humanity. You are different from a rock. You are different from a plant, right? As creatives, as people who are creative entrepreneurs, our value is determined by what are people willing to pay for. And if you're paying $10 a month for a Apple Music subscription, nothing wrong with Apple Music or Spotify, but if you're paying $10 a month for an Apple Music subscription and that $10 is spread across thousands and thousands and thousands of artists you listen to, and then it trickles down to about 1/3 of a penny per stream, and someone like me who makes music has to make get 1 million streams to make $4,000 a month off of Spotify. Whew, that's not very valuable, right? I gotta touch so many people. But what Patreon does is say, hey, if you have valuable content, if you are a content creator who has a tribe, maybe it's only 1,000 subscribers, but goodness gracious, you got a lot of depth with those 1,000 subscribers, and 300 of them are willing to be Patreon. You're not gonna make any money off YouTube. Your YouTube may not even be monetized, but 300 Patreons paying you $5 a month is $1,500. For a lot of people, depending on what part of the country you're in, hey, that's, you may be more than halfway at being able to quit your job. And there are creators like that don't have a ton of subscribers, don't have a ton of, followers. There's people who have less subscribers than me that make almost triple what I make on Patreon, right? Phil Vischer is one of them. He puts all his numbers out publicly. So this is good. This is good stuff, because a lot of you guys are at some point artists, creatives, podcasters, pastors, and you may want to monetize your platform and not be dependent on YouTube or on Spotify to pay you for it, compensate for you. So I'm gonna play you some more of this.
Joe's words.
Everybody's not looking to feed the soil. Some are just looking to take the fruit.
And this is indicative of a larger problem. This isn't just one deal. This isn't just Spotify. This is about tech companies paying creators the minimum amount that they can get away with instead of what creators are actually worth in the world. Creators are uploading billions of hours of stories and photography and music and videos and creativity and energy to these platforms, and they're getting paid a fraction of what they're worth.
And some of these
Yo, I love how passionate Jack is.
platforms is gonna have to get used to a whole community of people upping and leaving.
Come on.
Or you're just gonna have to acknowledge who exactly is raising the market share around certain places.
So when Patreon read the news about Joe and his podcast, our team called him up. This story is all too familiar to us. I ended up spending an hour on the phone with Joe. And what I learned was Joe comes from hip hop and Def Jam, and I come from YouTube and indie rock. But we were telling each other the same stories. We were telling each other the core of this experience of making something that resonates with millions of people and then getting undervalued by the platforms that we're using to distribute our work.
Don't ask me why Patreon is happening now. Go check your payouts on your stream.
Sheesh.
So not only is Joe bringing his podcast and the Joe Budden Network to Patreon, but we also made him an advisor. We gave him equity, stock in the company itself.
Now that's big. This is why that's big. First of all, Patreon is valued at $1 billion. It's a private company. It's valued at $1 billion. They're giving Joe stock. For his net worth, that's going to be crazy. I don't know how much stock. Shoot, I wish Patreon would give me. Hey, Patreon, if y'all watching this, give me some freaking stock. I'll buy in. So Patreon's valued at over $1 billion, right? They're not a publicly traded company. So there's that. That's huge for Joe. The second reason why this is huge is when someone has stock in a company and they themselves are completely dependent on their creative output for their life, their how they feed their family. It's a bit different than when Patreon has a ton of tech coders type, right? Meaning that like Jack has 124,000 subscribers, but I'm pretty sure Jack doesn't survive and live off of his YouTube AdSense, right? He doesn't live off of his vlogging. He's a entrepreneur, he's a CEO. Joe Budden lives off of his content. He lives off of his creativity. He lives off of his art. He lives off of his product. Having advisors in the mix who are actual creators and not just coders and not just CEO and right. This is and this is the same way with YouTube. Like if like going through my drama with YouTube, I discovered like these people aren't creatives on the other side of this. They're not running YouTube channels, right? They're just some coder that like is in Silicon Valley and you see what I'm saying? And so I think it's great to have creative people in the mix and in positions of influence at these corporations, because it's gonna be more relatable when someone is like Joe Budden, almost 1 million subscribers, one of the biggest podcasts. He's gonna be much closer to how things work than someone that's just there that isn't actually having to survive and live off of their art and their content. So those are two groups. One is good for Joe Budden, two is good for everybody else.
I want to partner more tightly with Joe to help us close the gap between what creators are worth and what they're paid. Joe's gonna help us think through that problem, brainstorm that problem, and he's also gonna help us shout it from the rooftops when we've got announcements about our progress.
This is huge. And I don't think you guys understand how huge this is. And again, it's not like I like listen to the Joe Budden podcast all the time, or because I think I'm endorsing Joe Budden or I'm endorsing Jack. This is huge because one, Joe Budden is not a I fit in the box creative. He is not a politically correct creative. He's not gonna tell people what they wanna hear, okay? That's huge that he's coming over to Patreon. Two, Joe Budden is a high profile creative, almost 1 million subscribers, household name, especially in a hip hop circle. So that, and you know, hip hop a lot of times drives the rest of culture, drives the rest of content. So you have someone that's a high value asset in terms of they were on Complex, Revolt TV. So you got a high value, high visibility person like Joe Budden, probably the biggest that I've heard of at this level, going over to Patreon, which is going to make Patreon a household name, which means that when I tell you guys, I got a Patreon, y'all are already gonna know because, oh, Joe Budden was just talking about Patreon or the likes of Joe Budden, right? Three, because he's a creator himself. He's not just an investor. He's not just a venture capitalist. He's not just a coder. He's not just an entrepreneur. He is a creator himself. So these are great things, in my opinion. And if you're aspiring to someday live off of YouTube or live off of content or live off of TikTok or live off of, I don't know, if you're a Christian, live off of your pastoring, your preaching, your ministry, right? There's now a path to this that's going to be a blueprint for a lot of the next generation. Joe Budden is a part of the last regime. He comes from Def Jam, comes from corporate, comes from Complex, comes from Revolt, right? Is the old media. I'm kind of in between. I remember what life was like before social media and being dependent on social media, and now I'm kind of able to forge my own way through our Patreon community. But there's going to be people on the other side of this that you're going to create in a world where there's always been Patreon. There's always been direct support. I mean, look at YouTube's restructured their entire payout model where now we have channel members and super chats and all these different things. So this is a good time to be a Christian creative. This is a good time to be a creative that doesn't fit in the box, that's not politically correct, that doesn't fit the mold. And I'm excited. I'm really excited. I'm excited that Jack pulled this off. Kudos to him and for the Patreon team for having the foresight and the vision to see this. One thing you can't buy is vision, right? You can't buy taste and you can't buy vision. And Jack has both, right? Jack has vision and he has taste. And so, again, not an endorsement, but hey, if you are looking at this and considering getting in the mix, you should really be thinking about not if you're gonna monetize and if you're gonna make money off of your art, when you're gonna monetize, when are you gonna start a Patreon, when, right? And that timing is important, right? That timing is really important because again, there's folks that start it, they launch it, and they're probably folks with 20,000 subscribers or 20,000 followers, and their Patreon don't pop off, and then there's folks with 1,000 subscribers and they're like at 50 Patreon out the gate. All of these things matter. We're going to be talking about this more on the channel, but I wanted to bring this to you guys. People have been asking me to react to this, and I'm ecstatic that this is happening. So, call to action. Call to action. A lot of you guys are watching this and you're like, oh, guys, we have our Patreon community. Now, I use Patreon a little different. We don't just do, hey, support Ruslan and give me money for making stuff. I mean, there's a component to that, general support, but it is also access to Zoom calls, Q&As, you having the access to talk to me face-to-face in a Zoom call, ask me the tough questions, right? Exclusive content. We've been doing this. Community is almost 500 people strong. We've been on this for a long time, for going on 2 years. 3 years. We started I think in 2018. I'm trying to remember the dates. Yeah, I think it was 2018. And I've intentionally formatted my community to really like be a community and a place where people connect and build relationships and all that kind of stuff. So if you guys want to partner with what we're doing, that is in the pinned comments, that is in the description. Go sign up. It's $4.99 a month. And again, hey, if you value what I'm presenting, and we're going to get more and more practical with these things, then partner with what we're doing, because what something is worth is what people are willing to pay for it. Right? And if you value content that doesn't fit the mold, content that is contrarian, content that is Christian, content that is like very, very truthful, transparent, right? If you value that, then hey, man, you can skip a cup of coffee once a month. You could skip eating out once a month and actually put your money where your mouth is, and everybody wins, right? And again, and I'm like, ask anybody that's in our Patreon community. We go above and beyond to add value, and most people get way more than they put in, and that's just a fact. Like, I don't care what anybody says, because we don't structure it in a way where it's all about me and my content. It's literally about the community and building it out. And so we music reviews, weekly Zoom calls, sometimes 3-4 Zoom calls a week, offline Zoom calls. Just look at the people who are part of the Patreon community. They'll tell you straight up. So that is that is a good action step. Is, hey, if you're considering being a creator, go partner with some creators. I support dozens of other creators on Patreon, because I just think, hey, if you want people to support you, you should go support us. Not creators that support me in return, by the way, just folks that I just support, right? Everybody from Capturing Christianity to Eshawn Burgundy to whoever, right? So if you're thinking about getting into this, hop around, poke around. I think my place is a great place to start, because I use it differently than most people do. And it gives you an opportunity to kind of poke around and look at how we do it. That's, again, very different. People aren't doing Zoom calls regularly 2-3 times a week the way I'm doing Zoom calls. People aren't giving this much content, this much value, access to stuff. So anyway, appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. If you found this video valuable, give this a like. If you found the content valuable, give it a like. And if you value what I do, like if you've been around here for a while and you've been watching the videos, guys, $4.99 a month like literally changes a lot. So go sign up. It would really help us out. It'd help us make more content, different kinds of content, different types of guests. It would help out a ton. So I'm gonna be more direct about asking people and telling people that they can do that in that way. So appreciate you guys.
Joshua the king came down and bore it all. Yeah, conversations front of the fireplace. All of my mistakes, how do I erase? Wanna operate at a higher pace. Birth pains causing the the body to dilate on a first name basis with the worst pain facing.